At just 14 years old, Abby Hernandez lived through something most of us only see in films, a nightmare that became her everyday reality. 3 days before her 15th birthday, Abby vanished without a trace. The search for her was immediate, intense. But what no one expected was what would happen 9 months later, when Abby walked back into her home, on her own, alive. What she went through during that time is something that will leave you chilled. It's not a thriller, it's not fiction. This is a real story of survival, mental strength, and the kind of resilience that most people never have to test. You're watching True Crimes by Dominic, where we dive into the raw, unfiltered realities behind real-life crime. If you're into true stories that don't need exaggeration to be terrifying, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it with someone who follows true crime like you do. It's completely free and it helps more than you know. And while you're watching, think about this. What would you have done in Abby's shoes? Let me know in the comments. Now let's go back. Abigail Hernandez, known to most as Abby, was born October 12, 1998 in Manchester, New Hampshire. Her parents, Xenia and Ruben Hernandez, split up early in her life, and Abby, along with her sister Sarah, was raised by their mother. But even through the divorce, Abby's personality didn't dim. She was bright, friendly, the kind of kid who brought energy into a room. Describing herself as a tomboy, Abby was into sports, classic rock, and had a confident style that matched her vibe. She also had a boyfriend, Jimmy Campbell, and by all accounts, they were inseparable. People close to them said Jimmy treated her with nothing but love and respect. Despite the early challenges in her life, Abby stayed grounded. She didn't dwell on things she couldn't control, and she had this quiet strength, always seeing the good in things. But none of that could prepare her for what was coming. Because on an ordinary autumn afternoon in October 2013, while walking home from school, Abby's life took a terrifying turn. October 9th, 2013 was a regular school day for Abby. She was just 3 days away from turning 15, which is always a huge day for most teenagers. Abby got dressed for school in a gray sweatshirt, black yoga pants, and a pair of black-heeled boots. These boots were Abby's favorite because her mom, Xenia, had just gotten them for her as an early birthday gift, and this was actually the first time she wore them to school. Now, if you know anything about new shoes, you'd know that the first couple of days in a new pair of shoes are a nightmare. You get blisters all over. Your feet hurt, and walking in them sounds and feels dreadful. Well, Abby was regretting her decision immediately as she made it to school. According to her best friend Miranda, Abby was walking weirdly all day and her feet hurt a lot. Aside from that, Abby's school day went pretty normal. She attended her classes, took pictures with her friends, and just like that, the school day was over. But at home, Xenia couldn't welcome her daughter after school because Abby didn't make it back. She usually took the bus to and from school, but Xenia also knew that Abby loved walking back home from school since it was a pretty short walk. So in Xenia's mind, maybe October 9th was one of those days when Abby decided to walk back home. Though at this point, her mother obviously didn't know about her bad day with her shoes. But soon afternoon turned into evening, and Abby still hadn't made it home. Xenia called Abby on her phone, but she wasn't answering. And this was the time when dread took hold of Xenia and didn't let go. Soon, Xenia made her way to the school and asked the librarian where Abby was. But the librarian's answer would make Xenia forget how to breathe. According to the librarian, Abby had left school hours ago on foot. Xenia immediately went to the investigators and reported 14-year-old Abby Hernandez missing at 7 p.m. that evening. The detectives sprung into action immediately, and it didn't take long before word quickly spread around the tiny community of Conway. The investigators got their hands on the school's CCTV footage, and they could see Abby leaving the school building and making her way towards her home at around 2:29 p.m. Abby didn't head in any weird or unknown direction. It was just a day like any other. She was wearing all the same clothes and she had her backpack slung over her shoulder. Nothing suggested to the police that she was running away. Nothing was missing from Abby's home either, so her disappearance was really weird. The investigators still asked the usual round of questions, and they were mainly concerned with whether Abby was feeling or behaving differently or contemplating running away from something. Everyone who knew Abby said that this was crazy talk. Everyone told the detectives that Abby's 15th birthday party was in days, and she was actively planning it. obsessing over the theme, menu, and how many friends to invite. She wouldn't just up and leave everything and everyone behind. All of her friends essentially said the same thing, that this just wasn't what Abby would do. Luckily, the investigators were working at the speed of light, plastering Abby's face everywhere in the media, asking people around town and looking for clues that could lead to Abby. In the meantime, a huge search for Abby was conducted. A lot of volunteers came forward and searched far and wide for Abby, hoping that they would find her. But sadly, they didn't. There were ground and aerial searches, and even the FBI got involved in Abby's case pretty early on. By the time a few short days had passed, hundreds of tips had poured into the police station. The investigators went through each and every one of them, hoping to get some credible information on Abby's case. They also frequently held press conferences to notify the public of recent developments in the case. But everyone was still on edge because there was no clue where Abby was. A website called Bring Abby Home was also set up, and it featured numerous photos and videos of Abby. Just 3 days later, it was Abby's 15th birthday, but there was no celebration. Rather, the Hernandez family held a vigil for Abby, and the community gathered and sang happy birthday and prayed that she was safe. Xenia was going through a really hard time, but I'm sure this goes without saying. She was trying to stay hopeful for Abby, and she had to be strong for her other daughter, Sarah. But she had those moments when she just felt empty and hopeless. Meanwhile, the detectives were still working their hardest to get this case solved. They checked Abby's cell phone records. The phone was untraceable after Abby went missing, but her last location pinged about a mile away from her home. The investigators also checked text messages, but nothing stood out to them. Abby last texted her boyfriend Jimmy, who was on his way back home from school as well, though he took the bus. The police did question Jimmy since he was the last person Abby spoke to, but they soon realized that Jimmy and Abby's relationship was normal and loving, and there was no way Jimmy could have been involved in Abby's disappearance. Fast forward to November 6, 2013, almost a month into Abby's disappearance. Xenia was at home and she picked up the mail. As she went through it, her eyes stopped at one of the letters, which was dated October 23rd, marking 2 weeks of Abby's disappearance. Xenia just had this feeling that this letter was important, and she ripped it open and read it. Then she read it again, and again. The letter was from Abby. It was her handwriting, but some of the words were kind of unusual, and Xenia knew that it wasn't how Abby spoke or wrote, but she knew that it was Abby. The letter detailed how Abby loved her family, that she was safe, but she couldn't tell them where she was. In the letter, Abby confirmed that she had run away, and it ended with Abby telling her mom to keep hoping. Xenia immediately gave the letter to the investigators, and it was a shock to everyone. Had Abby really run away? Why would she do that? And how did none of her friends know about this? But as soon as the detectives saw the letter, they knew that Abby was not a runaway. It all seemed too perfect, too scripted, and luckily the police didn't drop the investigation. The detectives also tested the letter, and it had Abby's DNA on it, so she was certainly the one who wrote it. But detectives did not believe that the contents of the letter were constructed by Abby herself. The investigators eventually released this information to the public, hoping for any progress in the investigation. But just like that, 3 more months passed without hearing from Abby or finding her. But let's fast forward to March the 17th, 2014, when a woman was driving down a road 30 miles from Conway when she accidentally hit someone else's car. When the driver of the opposing car emerged, he was armed and he proceeded to strike the woman multiple times with the weapon. It was a horrific attack, and I'm sure the woman was beyond terrified. Right after this, the violent man was obviously arrested. But what does this random attack have to do with Abby's disappearance? Well, the police just couldn't shake the feeling that this attacker could have had something to do with Abby's disappearance. They didn't make their reasoning public knowledge, but for one reason or another, something about this guy just didn't feel right. Turns out this man was 34-year-old Nate Kibby. Nate was an avid firearm collector and an overall bizarre guy. Not only was he violent, but he had very strong opinions on the Constitution, arms rights, and things like that. You know the type. I'm talking, this is the kind of guy who believes the F in F-150 stands for freedom. But anyway, after arresting Nate, the investigators wanted to confiscate all of his firearms, dozens of them, And surprisingly, Nate didn't resist. But when the detectives got to Nate's home in a remote area several miles from Conway, they immediately noticed a sizable shipping container tucked away in his backyard. It stuck out like a sore thumb, and they even asked Nate what the deal with this container was. Nate immediately went into defensive mode and told the investigators that they were only there for the firearms, and that was all they were going to get. The police did leave the property after this small exchange, but they had a very bad feeling about this mysterious shipping container. They kind of poked around at first, but Nate was right. The police were only there for his firearms, so that's all they were legally allowed to look for. So after a few short hours of collecting the evidence they came for, they walked away, never knowing that just beyond that shipping container door was Abigail Hernandez. Nathaniel Kibby, a very eccentric and strange man, was Abby's abductor. But how did Nate, a stranger to Abby, kidnap her? What did he want from her? And why did he target Abby specifically? Well, for that, we need to go all the way back to the fateful day when Abby went missing. As Abby was walking out of the school that day, she had actually missed the bus by a few seconds. Her feet hurt a lot because of her new boots, but she really had no choice but to make the small walk to her home. As she was texting her boyfriend Jimmy, she saw a car pull up from the corner of her eye. It was a 30-something man driving, and he noticed Abby's limp and offered her a lift. Abby, grateful for the man's seemingly kind gesture, agreed, and she got into this stranger's car. This was a big mistake, but Abby had no idea. After all, Conway was a relatively quiet, safe area, at least as far as Abby knew. But rather than take her home, this man drove to an isolated parking lot, and this was when Abby knew that something was very wrong. She tried to let the driver drop her off right there, but that was when he armed himself and completely subdued Abby. This man, if you haven't put two and two together already, was Nate Kibby. He was out looking for someone, anyone that he could terrorize. Anyway, Nate proceeded to tie Abby's hands and blindfold her, and he even made her crouch down in the leg space of the passenger seat so that no one could see her. After what felt like forever, the car stopped, and Abby was pulled out of the car and pushed onto something soft. It was a dirty mattress, and as soon as Abby's blindfold was removed, she took her surroundings in. The floors were metal. The room was small, and there were latches on the door. The walls of the small room were also padded to make it soundproof, and this time Abby saw her abductor wearing a golden Halloween mask. Nate threatened Abby that if she ever tried to leave or make a noise, then there would be consequences. I can't even imagine what Abby must have been feeling. The words scared and terrified don't even shine a candle on what Abby was experiencing. Sadly, almost immediately, the cycle of torture and abuse began for poor Abby. Nate was a disgusting and sadistic piece of work. Even though she was already locked up inside this giant storage container, Nate continued to keep her bound for days on end. Worst of all, he would attack her with anything from a stun gun to a dog shot collar, just for fun. Needless to say, on top of this, he was also repeatedly taken advantage of. Initially, all Abby could do was endure the abuse and pray that she made it out alive. Even though she was being subjected to the worst possible situation, she knew one thing. She wanted to live, and she wanted to make it back home. During her first few weeks of captivity, while the detectives and Abby's family were doing press conferences, Nate would terrorize Abby by telling her that everyone was looking for her. This was such a sick and twisted way of making Abby feel miserable and emotionally and mentally helpless. She knew everyone she loved was out there, just a few short miles away, desperately looking for her. But she also knew chances were they weren't going to make it in time. Abby watched her mom tearing up in front of the cameras. But as much as Nate's form of terrorizing was hurtful for Abby, it also gave her purpose. Purpose to live, purpose to hang in there, and purpose to quite possibly escape. 2 weeks into captivity, Nate ordered Abby to write a letter to her mom, the same letter Xenia got on November 6th. In Nate's head, this was his way of misleading the police from the investigation. So it is confirmation that Abby indeed wrote the letter, and she even managed to etch the words "help" and "kidnap" with her nails. But unfortunately, Nate was smarter, and he found out about it. Abby was terrified about what he would do to her, but he just made her write another letter, and after inspecting that one, he sent it out. But the abuse sadly didn't stop. But 6 months into her captivity, Abby realized something. She had power over Nate. She could easily manipulate him. It was a revelation of sorts, and she had to give it a try. Abby talked to Nate about normal things like two friends would, and just as Abby suspected, Nate was quick to form a weird bond of sorts with her. Nate would call Abby the closest thing he had to a daughter, which is a whole new level of what the heck. Nate would also sit with Abby and talk to her about his life and views on the Constitution. He would give Abby books to read, and he also removed her blindfold, so now Abby knew for sure what Nate looked like. Speaking of books, Nate gave Abby a cookbook, and it had the name Nate Kibby written on it. So this was the first time in 6 months of captivity that Abby knew Nate's name. Abby found out that Nate was a huge fan of Ayn Rand, a Russian-born American author who is known for developing a philosophical system called objectivism. Nate was also fond of the Gadsden flag and libertarianism, and he would talk to Abby about these things for hours, as if he was teaching a student. Nate also made counterfeit money, and this was his way of getting back at the government he hated so passionately. At one point, Abby even helped him out, all to gain his trust and make herself look as non-threatening as possible. Finally, the abuse Abby endured lessened, but it didn't stop completely. He began to see street workers, and get this, he paid them counterfeit money. So not only was Nate using the services of adult workers, but he also scammed them, which is just so unbelievable. Well, this would come back to bite him, and this would ultimately be Abby's ticket to freedom. Nate made Abby write one more letter before his interaction with the investigators about the firearms and the questions about the shipping container. The detectives didn't know it then, but they were so close to Abby, but they couldn't do anything. This interaction made Nate even more scared, and he confronted Abby and told her that she knew too much. He also tried to relocate Abby, but because Abby was blindfolded, she didn't know where she was being taken. In reality, though, Nate was only messing with her, and he took her in his car, drove in circles, and took her back into the same shipping container. But remember how Nate was seeing adult workers at the time? Well, one of them was a 27-year-old woman named Lauren Monday, and Nate had obviously scammed her by giving her fake money. When Lauren went to the store to buy something the next day, that was when she realized that the money was fake. Furious, Lauren called Nate and went off on him, even threatening to go to the police. Well, even though Nate was smart and he didn't give Lauren his real name, well, he wasn't the brightest, because the email he had given to Lauren had his full name on it, and Lauren was able to describe Nate's car to the detectives too. After the call with Lauren, Nate barged into the bunker container where Abby was, and he was angry, but also nervous. But Abby knew better than anyone not to poke the bear, so she remained calm and asked him what was wrong. That was when Nate went on a rant, and Abby listened to everything. She was used to it by now, and she didn't want to be on the receiving end of Nate's abuse. So even though she didn't want to, she listened to Nate rant, which was a good thing, because what happened next was something that even Abby didn't expect. Nate approached Abby, handed her a plastic bag with her clothes in it, and said, "I need to get you out of here." Abby thought that Nate was going to take her somewhere again, but Nate had different plans. He drove, and Abby was on pins and needles. Sure, Abby had gotten comfortable with Nate, and she could guess what he would do most of the time. But this was different. When Abby looked out of the window, familiarity and realization hit her like a freight train. Nate was taking Abby back to the same place from where he kidnapped her. He stopped the car, told Abby to get out, and without wasting any time or asking any questions, Abby got out, slammed the door shut, and saw Nate drive away. Abby was in a complete state of disbelief. She was feeling the excitement of being free bubbling inside her, but she was also scared that Nate would come back any minute and take her back to the disgusting bunker. Still in denial, Abby made the short walk to her home wearing the same clothes she had on 9 months ago, and she opened the door and called out for her mom. Xenia was in the living room, drowning in grief when she heard Abby's voice. Xenia truly thought that she was hallucinating, but when she saw Abby with her own 2 eyes, Xenia was thrust all the way back to that night in October, when all she wanted was for Abby to walk through the front door. The level of emotion that was running through these two was unlike anything you could imagine. All Xenia ever wanted, the literal only thing she could think about, was getting her daughter back home. Now, without any warning or buildup whatsoever, her daughter just walked right back into her life, safe and sound. Abby was now home, but Nate was still out there, and it wasn't easy for Abby to open up, understandably. Nate, before letting Abby go, threatened her that if she ever went to the police, then he would come after her and her family and that she wouldn't like the consequences. This truly scared Abby, and she would do anything to keep her family out of danger, even keep quiet about her abductor. Because of this, the public had very mixed feelings about Abby and her disappearance. A lot of people accused Abby of lying and said that she merely ran away and that the whole kidnapping story was a ruse to hide something else. Everyone questioned whether Abby's disappearance was even real or not. It was such a traumatizing moment for Abby and her family. The same community who was there for Xenia throughout this entire ordeal was now turning against her and her daughter. Luckily, with the police's help, Abby finally gained enough courage to reveal who her abductor was, and in 2014, Nathaniel Kibby was arrested. It took almost 3 years for the state to build a case against Nate, and he was facing almost 205 separate charges involving making counterfeit money, sexual assault, and the kidnapping of Abby Hernandez. Nate was eventually found guilty, obviously, and sentenced to 45 to 90 years in prison, and at his sentencing, a very familiar person made her appearance. Abby Hernandez. Her statement on May 16, 2016 was so moving and powerful. Her bravery is something we could all learn from. Abby walked into the courtroom that day, looked Nate in the eyes, and told him that she forgave him for everything he had done to her. Because of Nate, Abby sees life through a completely different lens now. After enduring something most of us can't even begin to imagine, she made a vow to never take her freedom, her breath, or even a passing sunset for granted again. That kind of trauma doesn't just disappear, but Abby didn't let it define her. Today, she lives a quiet life. She's a hairdresser, a proud mother, a survivor. She keeps things private, and honestly, who could blame her? But one thing is clear, Abby didn't just survive, she fought her way back, step by step, moment by moment. And that right there is what stays with you. Because this isn't just a story about what someone did to Abby. It's a story about what Abby refused to let happen to her spirit. Even in the darkest moments, she held on for herself and for the people who loved her. What she endured, it's beyond words. But what she showed us, the strength, the resilience, the refusal to break, is something worth remembering. If her story struck a chord with you, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to True Crimes by Dominic. It's totally free, and we drop powerful stories like this every 2 days. Want to support the channel even more? Leave a comment below. What would you have done if you were in Abby's situation? Let's talk about it. Your thoughts help others see the human side behind these cases, and it helps us keep sharing these untold stories. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to hear this story, because sometimes survival stories like Abby's are the reminder someone else needs. Thanks for watching True Crimes by Dominic. Stay aware, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.